Hello everybody, welcome back to A Court of Words and Pages. My name is Natalie and welcome to my October wrap-up. October was an interesting reading month. While I read a lot of books, the quality of the books were not good. I just was left feeling meh and disappointed by most of the books I read this month, which is really sad because I was really excited about all the books that I had picked out to read. But unfortunately, a lot of them ended up just letting me down. And the first book I read this month was The Sweetest Oblivion, which is one I was not necessarily planning on reading, but I got like roped into it and it was just like a one-day read. So in The Sweetest Oblivion, we follow Nico and Elena, who are part of two big mafia type families in New York. Nico is the head of his family and Elena is the daughter of like the boss of her family, I don't know. And so basically the thing is, she used to be like the adored precious daughter until I think it's maybe 6 months prior to the start of the book. Something happened, she left, things have changed. A guy died, we don't really know, there's kind of a mystery plot to it. So basically at the start of the story, Nico and Elena's sister get engaged, but there is a sense of chemistry between Nico and Elena, and the book's kind of about them fighting the attraction between each other. So I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. I really liked the attraction between the two of them, and I liked the characterization of Elena a lot. Nico we didn't learn as much about, but he was still an interesting character, and I liked the book. It was good. Next up was One by One by Ruth Ware, which was a tad bit disappointing. So the premise of this book is this company, Snoop, is hosting a retreat in a ski chalet in France. And while they're on this retreat, they get snowed in. They are completely cut out from the outside world. And people start to die off one by one. And so you're following like, who's this person who's trying to murder all these people. So we're following two characters in this book. The first character is this person who's part of the company, kind of. She's on the retreat with the rest of the employees, but it's kind of obvious that she's not really part of the company anymore. She was involved in the past and she still kind of has a role in it now, but she's not like as involved. And then the other person we're following is this lady who's working at the resort, and she kind of has a mysterious background. So the vibes of this book were immaculate. It was really well built, the vibes and everything. You know, just the kind of desperation of wanting to figure out who this murderer is. But that comes my other criticism. It was a bit predictable. Like, I don't know, it wasn't wholly out of left field. Like, I was able to kind of guess who the murderer was. So this one was fine. It wasn't the best thriller I've read, but actually, I don't know. I haven't read a lot of thrillers. But it also wasn't like great. Next up was another kind of mediocre thriller, but I think I like this one a bit more, and that's The Wife Between Us. So this one we're following, it's really confusing. So we're following like a woman whose husband has divorced her to marry a younger woman, and we're following kind of her mindset, kind of. There's lots of twists and turns throughout this book, so I cannot tell a lot, though I did enjoy it. The plot twists were really, really interesting, a lot of them. I do think the last one was a bit like, okay, you've gone too far, you're done. And also I did feel like during like the middle of one of the parts, it dragged a bit, and I was just like, can things start to happen again? It's like we do a plot twist, then it'd be like a bit of like kind of resolve it, move on to the next thing, start to drag, plot twist. Kind of, it did that like 3 times, so I didn't quite love it. And I also think looking back on like the first plot twist, which I feel like is like the main one, I feel like people could definitely predict it because I'm just kind of dumb and I haven't read a lot of thrillers, so I feel like it's more predictable than I think it is, and from reading reviews people have predicted it. Next up I read a romance, which is Fumbled by Alexa Martin, and so in this one we're following Poppy, who is a single mother. She has her gorgeous son Ace, who she loves with her dearest heart. Ace's father is not in their lives. He is a football player. He didn't kind of want to be around, but so at the start of the book, Ace's father, TK Moore, like comes back and is like, wait, I want to be part of my kid's life. I want to, you know, pursue this relationship with you. And so it's following that. And there's also some stuff where it's like, okay, maybe he didn't actually know about the kid. So I enjoyed this book a lot more than I thought I would, because I don't like love kids in romance novels just because I'm not the hugest fan of kids, so I don't love them in romance novels. But you know, Ace was just the darned cutest thing. And I also really liked the connection and romance between Poppy and TK, kind of like working out the things that went wrong in their past relationship and figuring out what they're gonna do. You know, we're in love with each other, but we also have to raise this kid. And also one thing I really liked in this book was the talk about football and the damage it can have on people's brains, as that's kind of brought up with TK. I really like the way that was handled, and I like that it was addressed because as a football fan myself, it is concerning to see like how banged up these players can get and how permanent the brain damage they suffer can be. Next 2 books I don't have a lot to say about, as they were just One Piece volumes 2 and 3. Continue on with this series. I'm interested to see where it's going to go, but don't have many thoughts on it. Next up, I read Carmilla, which is a classic. It's a classic short story, and it's kind of like the original vampire story, which, you know, Dracula is often considered, but Carmilla actually came out like 20 years before Dracula. So in this book, we follow this girl and her father, and they live out in like the remote countryside in a castle. There's not really many people around. Basically, one day, this girl, Carmilla, comes to stay with them. Her mother has to continue on, but she's kind of sick and injured, so she ends up staying at the castle with the girl and her father, and weird things start to happen. There's also a bit of a romance between Carmilla and the girl at the castle, and it's an interesting short story. It's quite short. I guess it's more of a novella type thing than a short story, but it's really interesting. I thought the atmosphere created in this story, the kind of the gothic, creepy atmosphere in this abandoned castle, was really interesting. I will say the book is a bit repetitive. It does kind of drag in the middle, and the ending is kind of like, I'm gonna tell you what happened instead of kind of showing you. So that's my general thoughts. I enjoyed it, but wasn't my favorite thing ever. Next up, I read the Madison Obsession, which is the sequel to the Sweetest Oblivion. So in this book, we're following Gianna, who is the stepmother of Nico from the first series. She married his father when she was quite young. And she didn't really want to do this. This was something she was forced into by her family. So it's kind of following her life story. Once her husband starts to get sick and eventually dies, it's kind of following her life, what happens. And also, in parallel, her relationship with Christian, who is like a rogue FBI agent. He's part of the FBI, but he works for the mafia. And so it's following like their interactions as they have a long history with each other. Don't exactly like each other, but there's romantic chemistry there. So I really liked Gianna. I thought she was quite a complex character, and kind of seeing how in The Sweetest Oblivion, she didn't come up as the sweetest person, your favorite character, but it's interesting seeing this book, getting the backstory and seeing everything that she's dealing with. Christian was fine. Once again, there wasn't like much characterization to him. It's kind of like in this book, I feel it's like the girls are more like characterized and the boys are just kind of there to support them. But like the kind of the tension of not liking each other to like feeling like they had feelings for each other between Christian and Gianna, I thought was really well done, and I did enjoy this book. A romance book I didn't enjoy as much was Him by Elle Kennedy and Sarah Bowman or something like that. So in this book, we're following Wes and Jamie, who are both hockey players, and they used to be best friends. They went to the same hockey camp over the summer, and they were best friends until one fatal night a few years ago, and now they have not spoken since. But they've kind of rekindled their friendship, and now they're both back at camp, and it's the love story between the two of them. As, oh my god, wait, they like each other. Wow. I didn't like this one. I had expected to love this book because Elle Kennedy has written the Off Campus and the Briar U series, two romance series, which I absolutely adore. But this book was just like not it. I hated Wes. He was just like not enjoyable. And Jamie was like fine, but he was like stereotypical. Like there wasn't anything special to either character. I don't even know how to figure it out. It was all just like weird, and I didn't like it. Like their characters just like weren't interesting at all. And I was just really underwhelmed by this book and how much I didn't like it. Like the romance between the two of them was fine, but I like don't have much to say about it. The best part was Jamie's family. They were a hoot and a half. Moving on to another book that I was disappointed by, The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. I think this is probably my least favorite book I read this month. So I don't really know how to describe this book. We're following this girl who gets this letter, and it's like, hi, like you're inheriting this house because like some weird stuff happened to you when you were a kid, like a baby that you don't remember. So it's kind of following that plotline, like her finding out what her past was as she was adopted after this thing happened. She was basically left in this house. Weird, right? And then in conjunction as to kind of like how it got to like the story of the house and all of that fun stuff. Except for it was not fun. There was also a third plot line going on. This girl trying to get back to London. It was boring. This book dragged like nobody's business. Like there were 3 storylines, and yet I wasn't interested in either of them because it felt like they were just dragging and nothing was happening. And also, none of the characters were particularly interesting, but there was one character where it felt like the author was trying to do something with him, except for she couldn't decide if she wanted to make him good or evil, and so she would continually like flip-flop and see like, oh, she finally decided, no, she changed her mind, oh no, she didn't decide, oh wait, no, she changed her mind. So yeah, and this was just like the plot twists were meh. Wasn't that interesting? It became predictable, and that's it. Like this book was not enjoyable. I wouldn't recommend it. Then I tackled an intimidating beast, and that is Dune by Frank Herbert. So how do I describe this book? So we're following Paul, who is like the son of a duke who rules over this planet. And basically at the start of the story, the Emperor is like, hey, you're gonna like switch planets kind of, but they're not actually switching, with like your rival house or whatever. Like you guys are rival, but you're gonna take over the planet they were ruling over, and they're gonna go back to their other home planet because they had like 2 planets they were ruling over. But like the thing is, it's a trap. The Emperor is doing this because this house that Paul's father rules over, they have too much power, and the Emperor is scared. And there is also a traitor that your rival house has planted within them. So it's following them as they move to this new planet. And then also, Paul's mother believes he's like this chosen one that's been spoken of prophecies, but Paul doesn't love that. So it's following that. In this book, what the plot is like there to a certain level, this book is much more a discussion of concepts and ideas. The world is interesting because Frank Herbert built this huge, vast, and massive world that like is confusing, but it's really interesting. Like in the back of the book, I'm gonna admit I did not read this part. It's like just like 50 pages or something about the world. But I feel like it is fairly easy to adapt once you get past like the 100-page mark of the book. And what was there of the plot I did find interesting. I mean, in the beginning, like before the guy betrays them, it's like every time you're in his head, he's like, I am the traitor. I will betray them, but they cannot know. Oh, she just said something. Does she suspect me of being the traitor? No, she cannot know. It just gets repetitive. And I do think some of like the discussions Frank Herbert was having, like about the whole Paul is the chosen one, but he doesn't want to be. I thought that discussion was interesting, but I will say some of the discussions probably went a bit over my head. But so I thought this book was really interesting. I thought the characters were all really interesting. And actually, currently, I am watching the movie. So that's the current vibe, and I'm excited to continue on with this series. And then I read another romance book that I was underwhelmed by, and that is Blind Landing. So in this book, we're following Natalia, who is a gymnast, and she is striving for the Olympics. But something has happened to her where like she's having trouble with one of her dismounts. It's like a mental block. So she gets trained by Spencer. He's a former gymnast coaching at this place. He's like the bad boy. You know, he is the bad boy. He's everything every girl wants. And of course there's romance between the two of them. I mean, he's training her, close proximity, romance. This book was fine. I didn't love it, but it was fine. I didn't like Spencer. I also just like don't think that like I love that type of like bad boy player type boy. And also just some of the things he was trying to ask of Nat just were like, dude, this isn't what she wants. But it's also weird because like some of the things that Natalie did weren't aligning with what she said she wanted to do and like what she wanted. But one thing I did enjoy this book was I did enjoy the discussion of like how toxic the world of gymnastics can be and how bad the coaches can be, because there was kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a plot line similar to what happened in 2016 with finding out how toxic and bad the U.S. gymnast system was. So I enjoyed that discussion, but it was just meh. And then I read my classic for the month. I kind of think about it, I read like 3 or 4 classics. We're going to talk about the possible 4th one next. But this was like what I intended my classic to be. That is Dracula by Bram Stoker. So this is like the original vampire story. Well, it's considered the original vampire story. Of course, from earlier in the video, we know that Carmilla is actually kind of the original vampire story. But this is the highly praised, well-acclaimed, well-known vampire story that started them all. So this book has a ton of different plot threads, but what you start off at the beginning is that you're following Jonathan Harker, who is going to visit Count Dracula out in Transylvania, and it's following him on his journey, and then once he gets to the castle, and what happens to him there. And then another storyline that you follow pretty early in this book is these 2 friends. One of them starts getting sick, kind of weird. She's becoming very frail. Having weird dreams, sleepwalking, and it's like kind of trying to figure out what's going on there. And so basically on the back of the book it says, Dracula chronicles the vampire's journey from his Transylvanian castle to the nighttime streets of London. There he searches for the blood he needs to stay alive, the blood of strong men and beautiful women, while his enemies plot to rid the world of his frightful power. So really at its core, this book is about these people trying to get rid of Dracula. So one of the things I absolutely loved is the writing style of this book. It's told in a bunch of journal entries and diaries and like newspaper clippings. So it's kind of like mixed media, but like from like the 1900s, like early 1900s. It was fascinating. I will say the beginning of this book dragged a bit, and it is very repetitive towards the beginning of the book, and it feels like it's like skirting around the fact that like he's a vampire. It's like any modern day reader knows that Dracula is a vampire because that's what, you know, society and like pop culture has led us to know. But like obviously probably at the time it was written, this wasn't like a well-known thing. Another thing, the atmosphere in this book, the gothic atmosphere, very similar to Carmilla, was so well developed in this book. It was fascinating. You feel it deep in your bones. And like once the plot really started going, once they finally realized vampires, this book was so interesting and I enjoyed it so much. This is one that took me a long time to read, but it's because I was just soaking it in and delighting myself in this book, which I absolutely adore. This is like, I don't know if it's my favorite book I read this month, but it's definitely up there. It's weird, I think that and Dune are my 2 favorite books I read this month. What do you know? The final book I read this month was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. So I read this over Halloween weekend because, you know, I was thinking, oh, it's a horror book, Halloween, perfect vibes. And I do also know I'll be reading more Shirley Jackson throughout the year, as in, I think it's the second quarter, so we're about to start the second quarter in school. We're going to be reading the short story The Lottery by her. But so this book is about a group of people led by Dr. Montague, I think is how you say his name, who go to Hill House, which is like this famous haunted house. Like people don't go there because Dr. Montague wants to like discover, like, and research haunted houses, like what makes houses haunted and how does it like affect people. So it's following these 4 different people who go there. Dr. Montague, 2 girls who go in as assistants, and then like the guy who's like part of the family of the house who like goes there to like be there with them, kind of, and it's like following their story. I didn't love this one. It was a bit strange. The dialogue was like really weird and it was really confusing. I just wasn't fully interested in this book, and I don't know if it's a book thing or if it's just this isn't my type of book. This horror isn't something that like I love, and I think this is a learning experience because I don't think I love horror books. So of course I wouldn't love this book, but I wanted to give it a try. Some of the like the creepy stuff that was happening felt like it was like on the back burner, and it was just really weird in some of the stuff that was happening and like how characters reacted to it, and I just didn't find it realistic, and I didn't love it. And also like we were really in this one character and she was like really in her head, which is not enjoyable to read. Like as someone who is anxious all the time, I feel like she was anxious all the time, and we were just not a good mix reading together. So that was Haunting of Hill House. Did not love that book. So those were all of the books I read in the glorious month of October. I think I read 14 books this month, so that's not bad, but I'm hoping the quality of books improves in November. Although, I mean, I guess it's bound to happen because I haven't really read any books this month, and I am enjoying what I'm reading so far, so that's a good sign. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Down below will be links to all of the books I talked about in this video, as well as my Bookstagram and my Goodreads if you want to follow me there. Subscribe to see more content from me, and thank you all so much for watching. Bye!